Welcome to Culture Over Coffee, a podcast focused on improving company culture and fostering employee engagement. Every week, we chat with experts and thought leaders about the latest proven practices to reduce regrettable turnover, increase productivity, and retain key customers. So pour a cup of your favorite brew and join us. I'm your host, Beth Sunshine, SVP at Up Your Culture. Engagement may be strong at the top, but it's not making its way down the org chart. In this episode, I'm sitting down with Kate Rehling, Senior Talent Analyst and Engagement Specialist at Up Your Culture, to explore the troubling disconnect between executives and employees when it comes to culture and engagement. Kate shares some amazing thoughts to consider, like how frontline employees can easily feel disconnected if communication is top-down and infrequent, why managers are the mirror for how culture is functioning in real time, and finally, why people can't commit to the present if they don't see the future. Kate, I am so glad to have you here. I get to work with you all the time as an engagement specialist, as a culture coach at Up Your Culture. You have had a front row seat to how culture plays out on the ground in so many organizations. I think this conversation is going to shed some light on what leaders may be missing and what they can do to make a real impact. And like I said to you before we even started, I have been really looking forward to this.
Me too. I'm really excited. I was deep into the Engage report. I was so excited to join you today. I even brought my Culture Over Coffee mug.
Me too.
During our podcast recording, but absolutely, I can't wait to dive into some of our takeaways.
Me too. Good. Well, let's do just that. Let's dive in. And my first question, the one that I was really anxious to get to, is there's just such a huge disconnect between the C-suite and the rest of the company. And I know when we talked about this before, we sort of envisioned this pyramid that you might reference, but 80% of executives say that they're engaged. That's high levels of engagement at the top, where only 28% of employees feel the same. I know I found that really striking, and I'm wondering if you can explain what's causing the breakdown and why isn't culture reaching the front lines?
Yeah, that's actually amazing that there's such a discrepancy. We did use a pyramid to help people visualize things in the Engage report this year, with the C-suite at the top, managers in the middle, and employees at the bottom. And 80% of execs are engaged. When we present data to the clients that we work with, I mean, Beth, 80% that's the threshold we want people to reach.
Right.
That's that threshold where you have a competitive edge in the marketplace. So it's something to celebrate, but it's certainly concerning that you can't say the same for managers and for employees. And culture is the lever that you pull to increase employee engagement. We say it all the time: the stronger your culture, the higher levels of employee engagement you'll have. And there's often a perception gap, I think, because executives experience culture very differently. When you think about it, they're closer to strategy. They're more autonomous. They have more visibility into the decision-making process and into the why behind that decision-making. Meanwhile, frontline employees, they can easily feel disconnected if communication is just like top down and not very frequent, because they aren't privy to a lot of information that executives can easily take for granted that people know. I mean, often, simply put, people don't know. Assumptions are being made. So I would say culture doesn't scale just through hallway posters. It's not just on the walls. It's really shaped by those daily interactions. So if leaders aren't intentional about translating culture into behaviors that show up in team meetings and recognition and performance feedback, if they aren't intentional about sharing the why behind decisions that are being made, everything can get lost in that execution piece. I think too many assumptions are happening here.
I love the way you wrap that up. I was hanging on your every word, because just the way you position that even was an aha moment for me, and I've spent time on this, but
You
it's
have.
about visibility and the why. And I love the way you phrased it, that it could be so unintentional. Executives may assume that everyone has that same 3D picture that they do, and they don't. That was really a light bulb. Thank you for that. In this report, you mentioned that the pyramid, and you also mentioned that there are kind of three sections to it. So you've got those executives, and then the mid-level managers come next, and there's already a drop there. Those mid-level managers are often the glue. That's how we tend to think of them. They're the glue between leadership and frontline employees, and yet only 42% of that really crucial group. I mean, the glue, the mortar that holds the brick together, however we want to visualize it, they're important. And only 42% of them feel engaged. And a lot of them, many were saying that they felt as though culture was getting worse in their organization instead of better. So from your perspective, what unique pressures is that group, the glue? What are they facing right now? And how can we better support them? And how can we increase engagement?
Yeah, the glue is near and dear to my heart because before I transitioned roles to work on your team, Beth, I was part of the glue. I was a middle manager, and it can be really tough. I think leaders need to listen up the chain. Managers are a mirror of how culture is functioning in real time. And you said it. Mid-level managers are under enormous pressure right now. They're expected to deliver results, but they're also expected to support their teams emotionally. They're expected to interpret strategic shifts, and often it's with little or minimal resources. They're really the most overstretched link in the chain. And supporting them, I believe, really means investing in their development, giving them clear context, not just tasks, but clear context surrounding the tasks that they can share with others. And also, they need safe spaces where they can ask for help without feeling like they're failing. And honestly, I think that's one of the most important things. So often, people are promoted into management because they were doing well in their previous roles. It doesn't necessarily mean that their previous roles were in management, though. Many don't have experience managing people. And we know managing people, it takes talent, but it also takes skill. So you can't just assume that when someone's promoted, they know how to manage people. You can't assume that they know how to communicate with others. You can't assume that they know how to have tough conversations. These are the things companies need to be investing in when it comes to middle managers. And consistently, companies are falling short here in that support.
Interesting to think that we're rewarding people for doing good work, moving them into this new role as reward, and yet leaving them in many cases unarmed to have success. Interesting insight. One of the things you talked about earlier was the why and just the importance in sharing purpose. And we were talking about executives at the time, but this group you're talking about now too, those middle managers, they need to feel a sense of purpose, share a sense of purpose. That's a lot of what the shared mission of an organization is built around. What happens when employees don't feel that sense of purpose? And why is it that maybe that message is getting lost a bit as we move down the org chart?
Yeah, another message kind of getting lost in translation. Again, leaders need to connect the dots. How does my daily work contribute to something bigger? And that translation is often missing, especially when you consider that layer of middle managers being overwhelmed or middle managers being underinformed. So instead of the message, this is why we're doing these things, it can easily become, okay, do these things now, get them done, then let me know when they're done so I can give you more things to do. And we're just going to continue that cycle, right? So purpose can get lost in the busyness of things, and it takes consistent intentionality over time to build a habit of sharing purpose often. And I mentioned the why earlier. We know purpose is directly tied to the why. Why are we doing this? And what impact does it have? And those questions, really, they should be answered each time a decision is made, each time a tough conversation is had, each time employees are experiencing some sort of change. Those dots need to be connected. And like a lot of what we say, it sounds simple, but it isn't always easy, especially when you're just pulled in so many different directions all the time.
That's true. Understanding the why behind something is so critical. I mean, you think back to children or yourself as a child. How many times did you ask the question, why? Why are we doing this? Why are we going there? As adults, we probably are just as curious, and we need to know that why just as badly. On top of the why are we doing it, it's also really important to know where we're going. And that vision seems to be potentially not as clear either. The report highlighted that only 71% of people are motivated by their company's vision. And that number seems to be much lower for newer employees. Interesting. So someone's new to the gang and they're less motivated by the vision. That's interesting. So why is a clear, compelling vision so important for engagement? And what do you think is going on here?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of different layers there, right? There's the vision, the where in and of itself, and then there's the motivating factor of it. And so that makes it even that much more difficult. But people need direction. They need to know where the company's heading and how they're going to get there. What's the destination? And not only that, but what is the roadmap to get there? What does that look like? And so I think about my GPS when I think about a roadmap. And the last time I punched an address into my GPS, it did not tell me, I'm sorry, I can't tell you where you're going. Imagine if it did, right? How demotivating would that be? Honestly, I would probably get back out of my car. I'd put my pajamas on. I'd say, forget it. I'd order takeout, whatever. And I think that's how employees are feeling when a company's vision is unclear. They have no idea where they're heading. Why are they even in the quote unquote car, right? Why do they want to travel forward? That unknown is really demotivating. And people can't commit to the present if they don't see a future. So companies need to prioritize a very strong and a very compelling vision. And honestly, this vision really needs to start at the top. It needs to come from the CEO of the company, and then it needs to be consistently trickled down through management and to employees, and it needs to be repeated often. That frequency piece is really key.
I love the GPS analogy, and I can picture getting out of your car, putting on your jammies. That really translates to employees checking out of their job, really kind of sitting back and thinking, you know what? I'm not going to get all wrapped up in this. I was really, really good visual. So we've talked about the why. We've talked about sort of where we're going, that vision. I want to talk a little bit about how we get there. Many leaders believe that they're modeling the company's values. At our company, we talk a lot about our values of quality, integrity, and responsiveness. I don't think there's an employee here that couldn't tell you what our values were, what they mean, how they've demonstrated them. That's something that I know is just really important to us. But nearly half of employees, according to this survey, they can't name their core values. I don't know if that's because maybe their company hasn't really locked them in or if they haven't communicated them, not sure. But nearly half can't name them. Even more concerning, 84% of employees believe that their leaders tolerate behaviors that don't align. So, wow, we say we believe in whatever integrity, and yet we're okay with people who demonstrate a lack of integrity. That's a little mind-boggling. How can leaders make sure that their values aren't just, words on their website, something that looks pretty in the lobby, but they're actually alive in the culture every day?
Yeah, honestly, out of the entire shared mission, the core values, the how, it's my favorite piece because it can make such an impact. That's actually one of the reasons I joined our company, is because the core values were so prevalent. I could recite them before I was even offered the job opportunity. They're that important. And also just making sure that everybody in the company is aligned to them. So what really stands out to me and what you shared, Beth, is that 84% who believe their leaders tolerate behaviors that don't align. And a big misstep in core values, I think, is a lack of clarity. Organizations have to make sure that their core values are clearly defined. The expectations have to be spelled out, because we know how dangerous it can be when things are left open to interpretation. We talked about assumptions earlier in the episode. It allows people to make assumptions about what core values really mean. And when I think about core values, I think they should really be treated like a closing to-do list at a retail store or a closing to-do list at a restaurant. The list of items to do before you close, it doesn't usually just say, okay, clean up and then lock up. If it did, some people would sweep the floors. Some might say, oh, yeah, they're fine. They'll wait till tomorrow. Others might dust. Some might not. Some would clean up the countertops. Some might just leave a few dishes for tomorrow. Maybe even some people forget to lock every door. But hey, they all technically cleaned up. They all technically locked up, right? According to their own definition of doing so. But instead, the most effective closing lists are very specific about what to do and when to do it. Which floors need to be swept, how often to mop, when to dust, maybe even what cleaner to use when you're doing those things. Because saying clean up isn't enough, and it allows for too much inconsistency. The same can be said for core values. It isn't enough just to say your core value is accountability. What does that really mean? Some might think that means holding others accountable to deadlines. Some might think that means I need to hold myself accountable to things. Some might think, well, we can hold people accountable when it's easy, but let's just brush those tough accountability conversations under the rug. Instead, everyone needs to know what the core value of accountability means you always do and what it means you never do. Because not only does that provide clarity, it also provides an easier vessel for those difficult conversations to happen, just like those clear and specific closing checklists do, right? So for example, if you're having a conversation and accountability is clearly defined, remember, accountability is one of our core values, and it means we never fail to deliver to a client. So tell me about what happened yesterday when we were unable to deliver on time, and how can we make sure that doesn't happen again?
I love that. As someone who grew up working in restaurants, I know those closing checklists well. I've never thought about how they correlate here. Wonderful visual. You're so good at making those connections for people, and you're making them for me. And I also really like just the always and never concept of let's not leave things open to chance. Let's really define what we will do. And that being a vessel for those tough conversations, bravo, because there is nothing that is harder for the people that I seem to be coaching lately than having those tough conversations. Yes. And wow, what a wonderful way to couch a really positive, growing message. So thank you for sharing that. I have one more question for you.
Yeah,
so for
absolutely.
Leaders who are listening, they genuinely care, but they don't know how to fix the disconnect in that, pyramid you're describing. What's one intentional step that they can take today, this week, this month to make sure that their culture is truly trickling down?
I certainly hope there are leaders who are listening who are inspired by this and want to take that first step. My best recommendation is to embed your shared mission into your weekly routine. And when I say shared mission, I mean those three pieces that we've talked about today: your purpose, your core values, and your vision. And it can be something really simple, like Add these 3 pieces to the top of every meeting agenda. Make it your default header on your computer as you're building these things out. And then devote 5 minutes at the beginning of every meeting to review your shared mission. Give people an opportunity to recognize others who've demonstrated your core values. And then take opportunities too to connect any announcement you're making, any change you may be making, any initiative coming through. Connect that to the purpose. Connect that to the why, and connect it to your vision, where you're heading. There's also great opportunity in people who embody your culture already. Tap into those people. We would call them culture all-stars at Up Your Culture. But people who embody your shared mission already, they're excited, and that excitement can be contagious, and they would love to spread the word. So tap into those people. Let those people be messengers for your shared mission as well.
Great advice. Great advice to bring it in to everyone's vision, their visibility every day, every meeting, all the time, and to really tap those culture champions. I love it. I'm so glad we talked today. I want to thank you again for a really meaningful conversation. I personally enjoy being able to sit down with you and have these talks, because often we don't get the luxury of doing that. And you always bring so much insight and heart to every discussion. So thank you. I think if there's one takeaway from today's conversation, it's that culture doesn't trickle down automatically. Leaders need to model it. Managers need to carry it. Employees really hunger for it, and they deserve to feel it every day. And you have really shined a beautiful light on this. So thank you. And Kate, we're going to include your LinkedIn information in the show notes. I know our listeners are going to want to connect with you directly. They most definitely should. And then we'll also link to the full Engage 2025 report, because we just touched on a little bit of it today. For those listening, if you want to dig in deeper to the things Kate was sharing, you can do that. Expand your view a little bit of the details of the survey as well. So thank you to Kate, and thank you to all of you who are listening and focusing on upping your culture. Thanks so much for spending time with us on Culture Over Coffee. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to subscribe and join us for every episode. For more helpful information about company culture and employee engagement, visit us at upyourculture.com.